"You can't be serious," Officer Jack muttered, staring at the flickering hollow screen in his small, cluttered station office. The Galactic Council's automated response was as infuriatingly vague as always. Assistance request acknowledged. Reinforcements en route. He leaned back in his creaky chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The Outer Rim station he'd been assigned to wasn't exactly the kind of post where miracles happened. Crime ran rampant, supplies were constantly late, and the Council's bureaucratic nonsense didn't make it any easier. For weeks, Jack had been battling with the influx of black market traders and rogue mercenaries swarming the sector. He needed backup, real backup, not just a few lines of text on a hollow screen. "Well, whatever they send, it can't be worse than the situation I'm in," he sighed, spinning his chair to face the window. The vast emptiness of space stared back at him, broken only by the glint of a distant asteroid belt. Probably just another rookie who'll run back to the core worlds the moment things get messy. A sharp ping echoed through the room, pulling Jack's attention back to his console. A new message flashed on the screen. "Arrival imminent. Docking Bay 3. Fast response time for once," he muttered, grabbing his jacket and heading out of the office. The corridors of the station were dimly lit and eerily quiet, the hum of the life support systems the only constant sound. As he approached Docking Bay 3, the heavy doors groaned open, revealing the cold expanse of the bay. And then he saw it. The ship that landed was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Sleek and obsidian black, it gleamed under the bay's lights, its angular design more advanced than any Council ship he'd encountered. The hatch hissed open, and a figure stepped out. Jack's jaw nearly hit the floor. She was massive, 8 feet tall, if not taller, with a lithe but powerful build. Her skin shimmered faintly, a deep shade of azure that seemed to ripple like water under the light. Her eyes glowed a soft, iridescent gold, scanning the bay with an intensity that made Jack's stomach churn. Long, silvery hair cascaded down her back, contrasting sharply with the sleek black uniform she wore. A uniform that bore the insignia of the Galactic Council's elite operatives. "Officer Jack Carmichael?" Her voice was smooth, but carried a weight that demanded attention. She stepped closer, her movements graceful yet purposeful. "Why, yeah," Jack stammered, craning his neck to meet her gaze. "That's me. And you are?" "I am Lieutenant Arena of the Zorinthian delegation," she replied, offering a small nod. "The Council has assigned me to assist you in your current operations." "You?" Jack blurted before he could stop himself. "You're the reinforcements?" Arena raised a single, elegant brow. "Is that a problem, officer?" "No, no problem at all," Jack said quickly, though his mind was racing. The Council had sent an alien, an 8-foot-tall alien, to help him? He wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. "Just wasn't expecting someone like you. I assure you, officer, my capabilities are more than sufficient," Arena said, her tone firm but not unkind. She glanced around the bay, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Shall we proceed to your command center? I'd like a full briefing on the situation." Jack nodded dumbly, motioning for her to follow him. As they walked through the station's corridors, he couldn't help but sneak glances at her. Everything about her seemed otherworldly. From the way her skin caught the light to the effortless way she carried herself in a gravity environment that would have felt heavy to most species. "So," he began, trying to break the awkward silence, "have you worked with humans before?" "On occasion," Arena replied, her gaze fixed ahead. "Though I admit this is my first assignment in the Outer Rim." "Lucky you," Jack said dryly. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere, where the crime is high, the resources are low, and the Council barely remembers we exist." Arena glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I've found that even the most desolate places can hold great potential. Perhaps this station is no different." Jack wasn't sure whether to be impressed by her optimism or annoyed by it. They reached the command center, a cramped room filled with outdated equipment and blinking monitors. Arena stepped inside, her tall frame making the space feel even smaller. "This is quaint," she said diplomatically, surveying the room. "Yeah, well, it's what we've got," Jack replied, motioning for her to sit. though he quickly realized none of the chairs would accommodate someone her size. She didn't seem to mind, standing comfortably as she examined the monitors. "Tell me about the situation," she said, her tone all business now. Jack launched into a detailed explanation, outlining the rise in black market activity, the rogue mercenary groups causing havoc, and the general lack of resources to combat the growing threats. Irina listened intently, her glowing eyes never leaving him. "It's worse than I anticipated," she said when he finished, "but not unmanageable. With proper strategy and resources, we can restore order." "We?" Jack repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, officer. We. Unless you plan to handle this alone?" Jack couldn't help but chuckle. "No offense, but you've got your work cut out for you. These criminals aren't pushovers." "Neither am I," Irina said, a hint of steel in her voice. She turned to one of the monitors, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. Within seconds, she'd pulled up detailed maps of the sector, highlighting key areas of activity. "Impressive," Jack admitted. "Where'd you learn to do that?" "Zorinthians are trained from a young age in strategic analysis and operational command," she replied matter-of-factly. "Now, let's formulate a plan." Over the next few hours, Jack found himself grudgingly impressed by Irina's expertise. She identified patterns in the criminal activity he'd overlooked, proposed strategies that were both efficient and effective, and even managed to hack into a rogue mercenaries' communications network to gather intel. But it wasn't just her skills that left an impression. Despite her imposing presence, Irina was surprisingly approachable. She listened to Jack's input, asked thoughtful questions, and even cracked the occasional joke, though her humor was as dry as the deserts of Mars. By the time they wrapped up their planning session, Jack felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was fighting a losing battle. "You're full of surprises, you know that?" he said as they left the command center. Irina glanced down at him, her golden eyes gleaming. "And I've only just begun, officer." The next day, the plan was set into motion. Irina worked with an efficiency Jack could barely fathom. She had identified 3 key outposts used by the smugglers, each guarded by a mix of mercenaries and automated defenses. Instead of brute force, Irina devised a multi-pronged approach. "We'll use their communication network against them," she explained, pointing to the glowing map displayed on the central console. "Interference here, here, and here will confuse their forces and scatter their resources. Once destabilized, we can move in and dismantle their operations systematically." "Sounds good in theory," Jack said, crossing his arms. "But what happens when things go sideways?" "They won't," Irina replied confidently. "But if they do, adapt. That's why I'm here." True to her word, the operation unfolded with precision. Irina led the charge at the first outpost, moving with a speed and agility that left Jack and his team in awe. Her combat skills were unparalleled. She disarmed mercenaries with ease, her movements a blur of calculated efficiency. By the time the team reached the central command of the outpost, resistance had all but crumbled. Jack couldn't help but marvel as he watched her in action. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of power and grace that made even the most hardened mercenaries falter. When the dust settled, Irina stood amidst the chaos, her glowing eyes scanning the scene. "One down," she said, turning to Jack. 2 to go." The second outpost proved trickier. The mercenaries had fortified their defenses, and the team faced heavy resistance. Jack found himself pinned behind a barricade, blaster fire zipping overhead. He cursed under his breath, glancing toward Irina. She was crouched a few feet away, her expression calm and focused. "Stay here," she said, her voice steady. Before Jack could protest, she leapt into action, her towering form a blur as she charged the enemy position. Using her height and strength to her advantage, she dismantled the defenses piece by piece, her movements precise and unrelenting. Within minutes, the tide of the battle had turned. When it was over, Jack approached her, shaking his head in disbelief. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said, half joking. Irina smiled faintly. "As long as we're on the same side, you have nothing to worry about." The final outpost was the most heavily fortified. It was the smugglers' main hub, a sprawling facility hidden within an asteroid field. Arena and Jack's team faced a daunting challenge, but by now, they had developed a rhythm. Arena's leadership and Jack's resourcefulness proved to be a formidable combination. After a grueling battle, the team breached the facility's central command. Jack and Arena confronted the smuggler leader, a grizzled alien with sharp, insectoid features. The confrontation was tense, but Arena's presence left no room for negotiation. "Your operation ends here," she said, her voice like steel. The leader hesitated, his compound eyes flicking between her and Jack before finally surrendering. With the smugglers neutralized, the sector was finally at peace. Back at the station, Jack found himself reflecting on the past few days. Arena had been nothing short of extraordinary, and her presence had completely transformed the station's operations. "I have to admit," he said as they stood in the command center, "I didn't think the council would actually send someone who could make a difference. But you've exceeded every expectation." Arena tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, officer. But the credit is not mine alone. You and your team have proven to be valuable allies." Jack chuckled. "Still, I'm glad you were the one they sent. I don't think we could have done this without you." Arena's golden eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a warmth in her gaze that Jack hadn't seen before. "Perhaps we make a good team," she said softly. As she turned to leave, Jack couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. "Hey, Arena," he called after her. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. "If you're ever back in this sector, look me up. I owe you a drink." Arena's smile widened just a fraction. "I'll hold you to that, officer." And with that, she was gone, leaving Jack to wonder if he'd just met the most extraordinary ally he'd ever have.